Hey, Tom here from Made by Loop, and in this video I'm going to run through 50, that's right, 50 free scripts for After Effects. It's worth noting here that a lot of these scripts are available on a name your own price basis. So although you can just enter 0 in the price box, if you do try the script and like it, then do try and help the developers in some way, either by paying the suggested price or sharing the script with your friends. Anything you can do to help is always much appreciated. I've put a link in the description to a post that contains all the links to these scripts. There's also another link to a video that will show you how to install an After Effects script if you need any help. So without further ado, let's take a look at these 50 free scripts for After Effects. I really need a whole video just to run through Duik, but to give you a brief introduction, Duik is a powerhouse for creating in-depth character rigs and character animation in After Effects. So just to give you a taste of Duik's power, I'll create an auto rig by selecting Hominoid. I'll then choose Human Simple. I'll choose Hide the Layer Controls from this little pop-up. And instantly you can see that Duik runs through and creates an entire character rig for us. All the limbs are connected up and linked for us. So all we'd need to do now is link our own character graphics to each section and start animating. It genuinely is one of the most powerful tools for After Effects, and it is free, although anything that you can donate to the project is always much appreciated. The next script we have is Butt Kappa from Battle Axe, and this script gives you a really quick way of changing the stroke styles of your shape layers. So, for example, I can select my shape layer here and hit this button to change the stroke cap to rounded. If I Alt or Option click this button instead, it also changes the join style too. Limber is another really powerful character animation tool for After Effects, and Limber Lite is a free version that will give you a taste of how everything works. In the free version, we get a simple button that lets us add bones or limbs to create characters in After Effects. So I can click the New Bone button, I'll enter left arm, and I'll press the button. And you can see that the script instantly creates a left arm for us, and we have these handy controllers that we could then animate for our arm movements. I could then create the other arm, the legs, and even the body as well. And pretty quickly we could create an entire character just using this really simple script. If you enjoy using Limber Lite, definitely check out the full version. You won't have to download this script from anywhere because it's included right within After Effects. You just have to enable it via the window menu. If you don't see it in the window menu, then chances are you need to update your version of After Effects. The script gives us 3 options to choose from: points follow nulls, nulls follow points, and trace path. For this example, I'll select the path of our shape layer here, and I'll choose points follow nulls. Instantly you can see that each point on our layer now has a null object that's linked to it, and we could then animate each of these null objects and our path would update automatically. This script from Good Boy Ninja is the exact opposite of the last script that we looked at. So rather than starting with a path and creating the nulls, with this one you start with the nulls and then create the paths. So I've got our 2 null objects here, I'll click the points follow nulls option, and instantly you can see that the script has connected our 2 null objects with a new shape layer. The crosshair script is all about creating guides in After Effects. So here I have a text layer, and if I hit the crosshair button, you can instantly see that the script has created a horizontal and vertical guide that intersects the anchor point of our layer perfectly. This is a super useful script for aligning layers in After Effects and saves you having to eyeball everything when you're creating guides. Ease Copy is perhaps one of the most popular scripts out there. Basically, what Ease Copy does is allow you to copy the easing from one set of keyframes to another. So in this example, I've got 2 text layers that animate from the center. One goes to the top, the other goes to the bottom. And you can see that the layer moving up has easing applied to it, whereas the one going down doesn't. Now let's say I wanted to copy the same easing from our top layer to the bottom layer. I can't just copy the keyframes because this would mean this layer would animate up as well. It would copy the position values. This is where ease copy comes in. So what I'll do is I'll select the eased keyframes and hit the copy button of the script. Then I'll select the keyframes that need the easing and I'll hit paste. And now you can see that the easing has been applied, but the values of our animation have stayed the same. So this is a super useful script for copying and pasting easing values in your animations. The PT Shift Layers script is one that I use all the time. It's super useful. In this comp, I've got a bunch of layers that are animating in from the left. But let's say I want to stagger all of these layers so they come in a sort of cascade effect. Well, this is where the Shift Layers script comes in. So what I'll do is I'll move the time marker to the start, I'll select all the layers from the bottom up, and then I'll choose the Stagger Selected Layers option from the drop down. I'll leave all the other options as they are, and I'll hit Apply. Instantly, all the layers have been staggered, and we have a much nicer animation. The Jiggle script is one of my very own scripts. It's one of the loop-free After Effects scripts, and it's used for when you want to apply the wiggle effect, but in one direction only. So let's say we want to have this text layer bob up and down. I'll select the position property. Then in the jiggle window, I'll choose the Y dimension. I'll leave the frequency as 3, and I'll set the magnitude to 100. I'll hit jiggle. And then if I preview this animation, you can see that we now have our layer wiggling, but only in one direction. This one isn't technically a script, it's an extension, and as such you'll need to enable it via the Window Extensions menu. So what this does is it lets you easily add some cartoony squash and stretch animations to your layers in just a few clicks. So what I'll do is I'll select my shape layer here, and then in the squash and stretch window, I'll hit the Select a Behavior button, which brings up this nice preset browser full of animated examples. I'll choose the Hello wiggle for this one, and then I'll hit Apply. Now if I scrub through the timeline, you can see we have the Hello wiggle animation applied nicely to our shape layer. So this is really useful for creating some complex animations in just a few clicks. This script is a nice little utility that adds an easy way to measure the distance between 2 points in After Effects. There's no panel window with this script, you just run it via the File Scripts menu instead. So when you run the script, it creates 2 null objects connected with a line, and a handy text layer at the top, which I can customize using the effect controls. And this shows the distance between these 2 null objects. If I move the null objects around, the distance updates automatically. The Sortie script allows you to sort your layers in the timeline by pretty much every parameter you can think of. So to demonstrate, I have a bunch of shape layers here that all have different scales, and you can see that right now they're not in any particular order. I'll select all of these layers, and then I'll choose Scale from the drop-down in the script panel, and I'll hit the play button. You can see that the script has now sorted all our layers by their scale, going from the smallest to the largest. So however you need to sort your layers in the timeline, Sortie definitely has you covered. The Key Cloner script does exactly that. It clones keyframes. To demonstrate, I've got this comp here with our text layer animating from the bottom to the top of our comp. If I wanted to duplicate this animation, I can select the 2 keyframes here. I'll then move the timeline marker a bit further down, and I'll choose the first clone option here in the script panel, and you can see that it's copied everything for us. Perhaps the best feature of this script though is the Reverse Keyframes in Place option. If I click that, I can instantly reverse our animation at the touch of a button. All the keys are in the same place, it's just switched them around for us. FX Console is a great workflow tool from videocopilot.net. To demonstrate how it works, I'll first select my text layer here. Now, when the FX Console script is active, what it allows you to do is use a shortcut to bring up the console. I have mine set to the default, which is Control Space. You can see that when I've hit Control Space, it brings up a search bar, and from here I can type any effect I want to, like fill for example. I can then hit Return, and it instantly applies the effect to my layer. What this means is, I don't have to go up to the Effects and Preset panel. I can just bring up the console window with my keyboard, search for an effect, and apply it instantly. I never have to use the mouse at all. So this is a really speedy workflow tool, and definitely one to check out. The Layer Random Shifter script does exactly what it says it's going to do. In this composition, I have a load of different shape layers that are currently scaling up all at the same time. If I wanted them to animate in at random times, rather than moving the layers around manually, I can use the Layer Random Shifter script to do that for me. So what I'll do is I'll select all my layers. I'll then come here to the script panel. I'll leave the min value as 0, and I'll set the max to about 60 frames, and I'll hit Shift them. Instantly, you can see that our layers have now randomly shifted in the timeline, and our animation is now a lot more random. This is another one of the free loop scripts. And what Selector does is it selects all of the layers above or below your currently selected layer. This can be really useful when you're working in compositions that have hundreds of layers on the go. Usually what you'd have to do is scroll up to the top of the timeline to select all of the layers above your layer, and then you have to scroll back down to find the layer that you were working on. With Selector, you don't have to scroll at all. All you have to do is hit the button, and the script will either select all the layers above or below for you. No scrolling, no movement of the timeline window whatsoever. There's also additional options to unlock layers and skip shy layers if you want to, which can be really useful sometimes. This is another extension rather than a script, so you'll need to enable it via the Window Extensions menu. Version Raptor is all about helping you version your projects and compositions easily. Plus, you get this cool looking Raptor right within After Effects. So let's say you're working on a project and want to create a new version of it. All you have to do is hit this button, and Version Raptor instantly saves the project and increments the version for you. You can also create new version of compositions too by hitting the Comp button instead. Another great feature is that Version Raptor will alert you if it's been too long since you last saved your project. An absolute must if After Effects has a tendency to crash on you. TrueComp Duplicator provides a way to duplicate a composition and all of the pre-compositions inside it as well. So let me briefly show you what I mean. Right now, I have my comp here with a pre-comp called My Pre-comp Text Layer. And if I open up that pre-comp, there's another pre-comp called My Text, which contains a text layer. Now, if I come back into my main comp here, let's say I wanted to create a duplicate of this comp. The usual way of doing this would be to come up here to the project panel, select my comp, and hit Command D. As expected, this has duplicated my composition, which I can now open up. The problem is, this has only duplicated the very top level composition. So from this duplicated comp, if I click through and then edit the text layer to say hello for example, it will not only be edited in the duplicated comp, but it will also have changed in the original comp as well. So this is where TrueComp Duplicator comes in. So I'll just undo everything. This time I'm going to select my composition in the project panel, but rather than hitting Command D, I'm going to use the TrueComp Duplicator window instead. I'll enable the suffix option, and I'll add a space, a hyphen, another space, and the word new in all caps. I'll leave everything else the same, and I'll hit the Duplicate Selected button. So now we've got this pop-up window, and you can see that it says that it's duplicated 5 items, which is promising. In the project panel, we have our duplicated comp with the new suffix that we added. And this time, if I open it up, and then open up all the pre-comps, I can change the text layer to say hello, and it will only update in our duplicated comp. If I open up our original, everything else has stayed the same. So that's a very brief introduction to the TrueComp Duplicator script. but you can see that it's super useful for duplicating everything in your compositions. Insta-control is just one big button. And what this script does is it allows you to add effect controllers to control things like your layer's position, scale, and rotation, for example. So all I have to do is select the position property of my layer here. I'll hit the button, and then if I open up the Effect Controls panel, I can now control my layer's position from here rather than the position property directly. What this means is that we can lock this Effect Controls panel and animate it from a different composition, for example. So this can be really useful in certain situations. Ouroboros is a great script for creating multicolored strokes in After Effects. To quickly demonstrate, the first thing I need to do is create a shape from the script panel. So I'll choose a circle, I'll leave the diameter at 500, and I'll click OK. Then what I need to do is click the Ouroboros button. Instantly you can see that this has given us 3 stroke colours in this one shape layer. Then what we can do is add all these extra options to our shape as well. We can click the colour control button and change the colours. We can enable the trim paths control option and then change the end value so that we separate out the segments. And then we have all of these other options we can customize as well. I recommend checking out the script page for this one for some really cool examples of what you can create. The tilde script adds waves to your shape layers in After Effects. So in this composition, I have a simple line shape, and I'll hit the waves button, and instantly you can see that we've now got a lovely wave added to our shape. If I come up here to the Effects Control panel, I can then change the look and feel of the wave and add keyframes to animate it if I needed to. The Trim Comp to Contents script focuses on trimming your compositions to the layers inside of it. So in this comp here, I have a bunch of layers that are quite spread out, and we have this big gap that we want to get rid of at the start. And over here, layer 3 also runs over the end of our composition. So the usual way of trimming a composition will be to set the work area bar to the start of the layers, and then we'd right click and choose Trim Comp to Work Area. But with this script, it's literally just a single click. So I'll hit Trim Comp, and you can see that not only has it trimmed our comp perfectly to match our layers, it's also added some extra time at the end to incorporate the layers that ran over. If you've ever needed to create animations for social media, then you'll know it can be quite tricky to keep track of all the different composition sizes for each of the different social networks. So that's where the Sociable script comes in. Rather than manually creating your social compositions, with Sociable, you can just select the social video type from the drop-down. So for this example, I'll choose Instagram Story. We'll give the comp a name, Insta Story, and we'll hit the Create Composition button. Instantly, the script has created a new composition that's the right size and shape for Instagram Stories, and it's also added some handy guides to show you where the UI elements will be inside the app. This is another great tool from Battleaxe. Usually, when you create a null object, adjustment layer, or solid layer in After Effects, a layer will be added up here in the project panel within the Solids folder. So in a complex project, this can result in hundreds of unnecessary layers being added to the project panel here. The void script changes all that by creating alternative null layers, adjustment layers, and solid layers called voids, variants, and volumes, all of the V's. And these layers won't ever appear in the project panel. So if you ever need a null object, rather than creating one via the menus, you can just click Void instead, and this will create a layer that looks and behaves exactly like a null object, but it won't show up in the project panel. There's also some cool extra features too. So if you select a layer before pressing the Void button, for example, the script will automatically parent your selected layer to a new void. The timer script is another script that you run by going via the File, Scripts menu. With this script, you just select a text layer, run the script, and then you'll instantly have a customizable timer ready for you to animate via the Effects Controls panel. The RD render layer script is a useful one for compositing where you may need to render out specific layers by themselves. Or perhaps you have two different versions of an effect to send to a client. With this script, you can render out those two different versions with ease. So the Render Layers panel gives you a few options to choose from. By default, it will render out the selected layers in your composition, but you can also set it to the inverse so that the unselected layers are the ones that are rendered out. You can set all the render settings in this panel, and then you can either render the layers or send them to the queue. So for this example, if I select two layers and hit the Queue Only button, it creates two instances in the render queue, one for each layer being rendered out. So if we were to hit Render, we'd get one render with the top layer and another with the bottom layer. So this script is great for rendering out individual layers within your compositions. Triangular is another of the loop-free scripts, and this one creates triangles. By default, there's no specific triangle button in After Effects. You can create squares, circles, and polygons, but the process for creating a triangle is a little more complicated. But with the triangular script, you can just click the triangle button and it will create a triangle shape for you. If you have a layer selected already, like this solid for example, then rather than creating a shape layer, the script will add a triangle mask instead. The Match Rate script calculates the rate of change between two keyframes and then lets you create new keyframes with that same rate to extend your animation. In this comp here, for example, I have a text layer that animates down like so. And what I'll do is I'll select the keyframes and hit the Get Rate button from the panel. So what's happened is the script has calculated the rate of change between our two keyframes. What I can then do is move the time marker to 2 seconds, hit Apply Rate, and the script has added a new keyframe and extended our animation at the same rate as our previous two keyframes. The RD Comp Setter script is an absolute powerhouse that lets you change composition settings in bulk. All you have to do is select the compositions you want to change in the project panel, and then in the Comp Setter panel, you can change every composition value under the sun. So we could change the width, the height, the frame rate, the duration, and when we hit Apply, the script will add all of these settings to the selected compositions. So this is super useful if you have a lot of compositions that need to be updated all at once to the same values. This is another script that you run via the File Scripts menu rather than having a panel docked in the UI. So for this script, all you have to do is select your layers, run the script, and it will create a new null object right in the center point of your selected layers. Zero Tangents is a really useful script. So let me show you how it works. In this composition, I have a text layer with some animation on the position property, and you can see the path that the animation will follow. But let's say that at this point, we don't want the animation to curve here after it's hit the bottom. Well, all I have to do is select that point, and here in the Zero Tangents panel, I'll choose to zero the out tangent. Instantly, you can see that this has removed the second tangent control from that point. I could then select this point here and zero the in tangent if I wanted. And you can see that now, rather than being a curve, we have a straight line for this section. This comes in really handy when you're animating positions, because sometimes you may have a rogue tangent in there that messes everything up. With this script, you can just zero them out really easily. Text Evo 2 is all about animating text. In this comp, I have a text layer ready to animate, and all I have to do is hit the plus icon to add the Text Evo settings, and then I'll change the based on value to letters. Now, in the Effects Control panel, I can come to the transform options. I'll choose position, then I'll change the Y value to 150 pixels. Now if I scrub through the timeline, we can see that our text now animates really nicely. I could also change the opacity if I wanted to, and we can see that it now fades in as well. This is all using text animators, but rather than having to set up everything manually and add all of the properties yourself, this script does everything for you and gives you this nice control panel to work with. This script takes a shape repeater and turns every repeated instance into its own shape. So in this comp, for example, I have a shape layer with a single hexagon shape, and we have a repeater applied to it so that we have 3 extra copies. Right now, I can't select any of these extra copies or customize them in any way because they're all part of the repeater, and so that's where this script comes in. All I have to do is select the repeater from our shape layer and hit the Bake Repeater button. You can see that the script has now turned each repeated instance into its own shape group within our layer. So now I can click into the shape layer and change each of these repeated shapes if I wanted to. This script is super useful if you ever have to create animations from sprite sheets in After Effects. To demonstrate, in this composition I have this sprite sheet here which I got from opengameart.org. And what I want to do is turn this sprite into an animation. So the way to do this is I'll select our explosion sprite comp here in the project panel, and in the Sprite-O-Matic panel, I need to set some values. So in this sprite we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns. We've just got 1 row. We'll keep the rest of the settings the same, apart from the last one, which will change to 10 iterations. And I'll hit the button to animate. Now if I scroll down the project panel, we can see that this explosion sprite animation comp has been created. So I'll drag this into my composition, I'll hide our original sprite, and now if I press preview, we now have a completely animated sprite, and it's looking great. This is a great little script if you're ever creating some retro computer comps in After Effects. All you have to do is select a text layer, choose the type of font you want from the drop-down, and hit generate. Instantly, the script will turn your text layer into ASCII text like this. The layer repeater script is kind of like the shape repeater function, but for other types of layers in After Effects. So to demonstrate, I'll select this text layer here, and in the script panel, I'll keep the number of layers as 10, and I'll hit the layer repeater go button. At first, it doesn't look as though anything's actually changed, but we now have this control panel here in the effect controls. So if I go to the position value and into the Y value, and then I change the offset to a minus value, you can see that we have all of these copies of our layer. You can affect all of the different properties of your layer too. So I could come here to the opacity, for example, and if I set the end value to 0, you can see that the layers fade out gradually. It's a really cool script for creating repeating layers in After Effects. This is a really neat utility script in After Effects for quickly and easily changing the position of a layer's anchor point. For example, I've got a text layer here and the anchor point is in the middle. But let's say I wanted to move it over to the left of our layer. What I'll do is I'll first select the layer, I'll choose the left arrow here in the script panel, and I'll hit reposition. You can see that the script has now changed our layer's anchor point to the left, and crucially it's done so without moving the layer at all. Whichever side or corner you want to align your anchor point to, just select it here in the script panel and hit the button, and the script takes care of everything for you. I really like this little script from the team at Animatable. Just hit the button and the script will instantly create a cartoon lens flare for you, complete with a null control so you can move things around and animate it if you wanted. J.J. Abrams should definitely use this if he ever works on making a cartoon. The Raster Fast script is a great utility script for enabling the continuous rasterization option of your comps and layers. So in this comp, I have an Illustrator file and a few pre-comps to demonstrate. So with this comp selected, I can click the button in the script panel, and the script will enable the continuous rasterization settings for all of my layers. What's really cool is the script gives you this option to do this for your entire project as well. So if you have a lot of AI files that need the setting enabled, then this script will let you do it in a bulk operation. The Bendy Null script is great for setting up the CC Bendit effect and making it more intuitive. All I have to do is select my layer, click the icon, and this has added 2 nulls to my layer. I'll move the green one to the beginning of my layer, and the red one to the end. Then I'll select my text layer, and in the Effect Controls panel, I can then edit the bend effect to bend the layers. The Neat Freak script is all about changing how your After Effects UI is set up. So let's say you were working on a project where you didn't need to have all of these columns visible in your timeline. Rather than manually disabling them all one by one, you can use the Neat Freak panel to deselect all of the options. When you run the script, all of these columns will be hidden for you automatically. There's plenty of other options you can set as well, so if you need to make bulk changes to your UI setup, then this is the script for you. This is another script without a panel. Instead, you run it from the File Scripts menu. In this example, I've got a shape layer set up here, and if I run the script, it will add a null control which has a stroke value applied in the Effect Controls panel. So I'll just change the stroke value to 30, and what this script does is it keeps the stroke width at the same size, even if we were to change the scale of our layer. So if I scale this layer down, you can see that the stroke size is automatically maintained. By default in After Effects, if I were to create a new shape layer and then scale it down, you can see that the stroke gets smaller with our layer. So if you need to maintain the stroke size of a shape, this script is really useful. If you've ever tried to align 3D layers in After Effects using the Align panel, you'll have seen this message. After Effects just can't do it. But with the Align 3D script, you can. So if I select my layers and come to the Align 3D panel, I can click the central button and you can see that instantly our layers are all aligned even though they're 3D layers. There's also options for layer distribution, aligning to comp, and a whole bunch of other useful settings as well. If you've ever needed to create a loop in After Effects, you'll know it can be a bit of a pain messing around with the loop out expressions. With the Loop Maker script, you can just select a layer like this animated text layer, and in the Loop Maker panel, select the type of loop that you want to make. I'm going to go with ping pong for this example because it's the best name ever, and I'll hit the loop button. Then if I extend our newly created pre-comp layer and scrub through the timeline, you can see that the script has created the loop perfectly for us. This script lets you easily change the label color of items in your project panel. You can either change everything or target layers by their type. So for example, if I select a bunch of layers in the project panel, then choose Pre-Comp, I'll set them to yellow and hit the Set Labels button. You can see that the script has now changed our label color to yellow for all of these items. So if you want to organize your project panel, this script can really help with the label colors. When you're pasting text from a program like Illustrator, for example, the formatting of that text comes with it, like so. This can be useful in certain situations, but sometimes you may need the ability to just paste the text values rather than the formatting itself. That's where the Laundrette script comes in. Instead of pasting directly onto your layer, you select your layer, paste the text into this box here, and then hit Apply. You can see that the text has now been updated, but the style has stayed the same. This script is actually a suite of different scripts, and each one will allow you to create a different type of 3D shape. To demonstrate, I'm going to use the 3D box script. So in this composition, I have a 2D pre-comp here called Shape Side, and inside, all there is a 2D solid layer. In the Create 3D Box panel, I'll choose a width of 500, and then I'll hit the Refresh button so that it picks up our layers. Here's where we could set different layers for different sides if we wanted to. But for this example, I'll just use the shape side for all of them. I'll then hit the Create button, and I'll just move the background layer down beneath our duplicates, and you can see that we seem to just have one square now. But if I select the controller layer and hit R to bring up the rotation values and edit them slightly, you can see that we actually have a 3D box created. If you've ever needed to add lorem ipsum placeholder text to your compositions in After Effects, then chances are that you've had to go to Google, search for a lorem ipsum generator, and then copy the text from a random website. With Wordsmith, you have a lorem ipsum generator right within After Effects. So if I come to the script panel, you can see that we have a drop down here with 3 different options: words, sentences, or paragraphs. For this example, I'll choose to create paragraphs, and then you can enter the number of paragraphs you need in this box too, which I'll keep as 3, and then I'll hit the Add Text button. Immediately you can see that we now have a text layer, but it may not look like there's 3 paragraphs there. If I select the text layer and then reduce the size of the text, we can see that the script has actually generated 3 paragraphs for us. So this is really useful if you need a lot of fake text in your animations. The Advanced Compositions Grid script adds the ability to create more custom grids in After Effects. In the script panel, you have a drop-down list where you can select all manner of grids to create. Only thirds, isometric, or the golden ratio, for example. I'll choose isometric for this example and hit the draw button, and you can see that we have a really nice isometric guide layer to work with. Finally, we have the Hylian script. What Hylian does is duplicate a layer, but if there are any animated properties, rather than duplicating the keyframes, it will link the animation to the original layer. So let me show you what I mean. I have this text layer here and it has some animation on the position property. If I select the layer and hit the Hylian button, this creates a duplicate, but if I then open up the position property of the duplicate, you can see that there are no keyframes, but we do have an expression applied that links to our original layer. So what I'll do is I'll quickly split the 2 layers and change the duplicated layer to white, for example, just to highlight the change. So what's great is we have all of the animation controlled by just one layer. So if I decided further down the line to change the length of the animation, for example, by dragging this keyframe out a bit, I don't have to change any keyframes of the duplicated layer because it's all linked up for me. And this can be incredibly useful in all sorts of different situations. And there we have it! 50 free scripts for After Effects that will help boost your workflow. If you like this video, do hit like and subscribe, and visit madebyloop.co.uk for more time-saving motion design resources.